It is the autumn of 994. A small village in Aquitaine, in what is now southern France, sits at the edge of a golden rye field days after harvest. The bread on the table looks completely normal. By the end of next month, half the village will be screaming. Some will believe they are on fire. Others will see demons crawling out of the walls. Many will lose fingers, toes, and entire limbs to a black rot that creeps up the body while they are still alive. The local priest will call it a punishment from God. He will be wrong. What was actually happening was hidden in the harvest. And in this video, we are tracing the full, terrifying reality of the medieval bread that drove entire villages insane. To understand what happened to that village, you need to understand the world it lived in. Medieval Europe ran on grain. Wheat fed the rich. Rye fed everyone else. In the cold, wet valleys of the Rhine, the Loire, and the Vosges, rye was the only crop that would survive a bad season. Peasants ate it 3 meals a day, every day, in the form of a heavy black bread called pain noir. For most of them, bread was not part of the meal, it was the meal. But rye has a problem. In wet years and cold springs, a fungus called Claviceps purpurea attaches itself to the grain. It does not look like rot, smell wrong, or taste off. The fungus grows as a small dark spur on the ear of rye, hard and slightly curved, almost indistinguishable from the grain itself if you are not looking for it. Medieval peasants were not looking for it. They threshed it, milled it, and baked it into bread. That black spur contained a chemical cocktail so powerful that 2.5 centuries later, a Swiss chemist would synthesize LSD from a single one of its compounds. This is the terrifying reality of the medieval bread that drove entire villages insane, and it killed slowly in 2 different ways, depending on the season and the dose. In a wet summer, the fungus produced compounds that constricted blood vessels. People felt a burning sensation in their hands and feet. Their skin turned black, limbs withered and dropped off. Survivors walked the rest of their lives without fingers, sometimes without legs below the knee. In a dry summer, the same fungus produced different compounds. These ones crossed the blood-brain barrier, and so the village did not lose limbs. The village lost its mind. But what they did not know yet was that this had been happening for centuries. The first medical case files we have describing this come from the year 857. A chronicler in the Rhineland recorded an outbreak that killed hundreds. He described people writhing on the floor, convulsing, speaking in voices they did not recognize. The chronicler called it sacred fire. By the 11th century, the disease had a saint. Pilgrims traveled hundreds of miles to a monastery in central France that housed the relics of Saint Anthony. The monks there had noticed something strange. Sick visitors who stayed at the monastery for weeks often recovered. Those who returned home often died. The monks did not know why. The answer was almost too simple. Their monastery served bread made from wheat, while the villages served theirs from rye. We now call this condition ergotism, and the historical evidence is staggering. Records from medieval France, Germany, and the Low Countries describe at least 83 major outbreaks between the years 900 and 1700. The worst was the one we opened this video with. That autumn of 994 in Aquitaine killed an estimated 40,000 people. And then there is what happened in Strasbourg in 1518. In July of that year, a woman named Frau Trophée stepped out into the street and began to dance. She did not stop. Within a week, dozens of others had joined her. By the end of the month, the count was over 400. They danced day and night, in full summer heat, on a diet of contaminated rye bread. Many of them died from exhaustion, heart attacks, and strokes while still dancing. For 5 centuries, historians called it the dancing plague of 1518 and admitted they did not know what caused it. Modern researchers remain divided. Some argue it was mass psychogenic illness, collective panic spreading through a community under extreme stress and famine. Others have proposed ergot poisoning as a major contributing factor. The truth is probably both. Stress alone does not produce burning skin and convulsions on this scale, and Strasbourg in 1518 sat downstream of a particularly bad rye harvest. But this story is bigger than medieval Europe, because the fungus crossed the ocean. In 1692, in Salem Village, Massachusetts, 8 young girls began behaving strangely. They convulsed on the floor, claimed to see invisible figures clawing at them, and spoke in voices they could not control. The community decided they were bewitched. 20 people were executed before the panic ended. In 1976, A behavioral psychologist named Linda Caporel published a paper in the journal Science. She had been studying the Salem Witch Trials for years, and she had noticed something. The accused all lived in the same part of the village. They all ate bread from the same supply. The summer before the outbreak had been unusually wet. Their crop was rye. Her conclusion was that the Salem Witch Trials were almost certainly an ergot poisoning event misread as demonic possession by a community with no scientific framework to recognize it. Although the paper is still debated by historians, the symptom pattern is exact. So is the geography. So are the growing conditions. And that is not even the strangest modern chapter of this story, because in the year 1951, in a small French town called Pont-Saint-Esprit, the same thing happened again. On the 15th of August, residents began reporting visions. One man tried to fly out of a second-floor window. Another boy attempted to strangle his own grandmother. Across town, a woman locked herself in a room screaming that snakes were eating her stomach. Within days, 250 people were affected. 7 died. The official cause was ergot contamination in the local baker's flour. A Swiss firm had supplied tainted grain. This is the terrifying reality of the medieval bread that drove entire villages insane. But the strangest part is not that it happened. The strangest part is what one Swiss chemist had done with this same compound 13 years earlier. In 1938, a chemist named Albert Hofmann was working in a laboratory in Basel. His employer had given him an assignment that sounded harmless: isolate the active compounds in ergot and see if any of them might be useful as medicine. Hofmann was patient. He worked through the compounds one by one. On the 25th attempt, he synthesized a derivative he labeled LSD-25 and set it aside. 5 years later, he accidentally absorbed a small amount through his fingertips while reorganizing his lab. What happened next is one of the most documented chemical experiences in the 20th century. Hofmann reported intense color hallucinations, dissociation from his body, and a feeling that the laboratory walls were breathing. He had just discovered the most powerful psychedelic compound ever synthesized from the same fungus that had been growing on European rye for 1,000 years. The medieval villages were not insane, nor were they cursed or possessed. Generation after generation, they had been consuming compounds that are chemical precursors to LSD, sometimes in low doses, that built up over months, sometimes in catastrophic concentrations that destroyed an entire village in weeks. The dancing plagues, the burning saints, the witch panics, the convulsions, every one of them traceable to the same small black spur on the same tall stalk of grain. 1,000 years of periodic outbreaks, unexplained deaths, and mass panics, all traceable to a contaminant nobody could see. Wars were started over it. Religious orders were founded around it. 20 innocent people were executed in Massachusetts because of it, and almost nobody alive today has ever heard of it. So, the next time you walk past the bread aisle in a supermarket, remember that for most of European history, the loaf on that shelf could have ended your life. What you take for granted as the safest food on earth was, for 1,000 years, one of the most dangerous things a peasant could eat. The miracle is not that ergotism existed. What is remarkable is that modern milling, modern agriculture, and modern food inspection have made the terrifying reality of the medieval bread that drove entire villages insane nearly disappear. It is one of the rare battles humanity has actually won, and almost nobody knows we were ever fighting it. If this is the kind of forgotten history you find worth knowing, the channel exists for exactly that: reasons hiding in plain sight. Thanks for watching. We will see you in the next one.